In this video, I'd like to look at an Android app that has multiple activities, so various screens. And so the main screen is just going to be buttons that lead you to other screens, and then we can go back, etc. So the code for this example can be found at the URL seen here. Because the setup for this is a little more complicated than usual, I want to show you some screen captures that got me to the point, and then I'll show you the code that sort of fills in. But if you have, so I started off with our usual sort of empty activity, which had a main activity, and then I went to add activities. So here I'm showing sort of right-clicking in Android Studio, right-clicking where my MainActivity.kotlin was in the sort of folder above that, right-clicking on there and saying new, and scrolling down to activity, and then scrolling down to empty activity. So instead of making the layout and making the Kotlin code and connecting them, if I do this, it's going to provide me sort of a boilerplate for the Kotlin, provide me a boilerplate for the layout activity. It's going to do some editing of the AndroidManifest, though I'll have to do a little bit more. So this is sort of the more convenient approach than sort of doing all those sort of things yourself by hand. Okay, so again, in the Java folder, in the code folder, find where the main activity was, right-click, new activity, empty activity. That provides a Kotlin and an XML layout. So in the red arrows are pointing to when I added something called straight line DPR for straight line depreciation. So it provided me the file for the Kotlin code. It provided me the file for the XML layout. It connected them to some extent. So I can connect individual things in code that I make on the XML, but the generic layout, the generic connection between the two files is established by that previous action of right-clicking and asking for a new empty activity. So here I'm showing the two files, and here I'm showing you some of the Kotlin code. And here I'm showing the manifest, and because I added an activity, it added another activity tag. So here's the main activity tag down here with the intent filter, and sort of showing that, specifying that this is where you go when you're starting, when you're launching. But here's this additional activity tag that popped up because of that action, that previous action of right-clicking here and saying I wanted a new empty activity. And then, so the Android name, straight line depreciation, that was provided automatically, but I added this Android parentActivityName main activity. And that's going to be for conveniently going back when I'm on this straight line activity to go back to my sort of main menu. Specifying this property will make it easier to go back. Okay, and those are the pictures I wanted to show you. Now let's start looking. Here is the app. So here is the main activity, which is just buttons leading to other things. So I have straight line depreciation, and that takes me over to here where I have some initial value, salvage value, and lifetime value, and I can calculate a schedule, and I can change this information to, let's go for, start off with 90,000, end at 80,000, and go for 70 years and generate the schedule. And here's some schedule. Okay, so some little rounding occurred, so it's didn't quite go to 8,000, but 799, 995. Okay, And now I can hit this arrow to go back, and I'll go over to double declining. And I did some work with shared preferences so that the data that I used in one activity and the other activity they both share the same shared preference. And so it's a way for me to sort of communicate between. So there's the 90,000, the 8,000, the 7. And if I were to, and also it's shared preference. So if I stop the activity and start it up again, it will remember this. So it remembers it from one running of the whole program to the next running of the whole program, but it also is being used to share between the two activities. Okay, so let's have a look at, so the main activity here is just 2 buttons. And these both have pretty much the same format here, straight line activity is a text view saying initial value and an edit text for that, which is of the number decimal type for you to enter a number, something that says salvage value and an edit text to enter the salvage value, a text view that says lifetime, an edit text of the number type for you to enter a number of years, a button to produce the schedule, and a text view to show the schedule. Okay, there's nothing here about that arrow going back. That will be handled by code. So that's the action bar, and that will be handled by the code. And the double declining looks pretty much the same. Okay. Now let's look at main activity code. So I connect to the 2 buttons, and then I have click events for each button. Here is the straight line button click event listener. I'm making an intent. I make an intent based on this straight line class. Now over here it says class Java, even though it's in Kotlin, that's the way it is. And then I start the activity for that intent. And the same thing down here for this other method of depreciation, the double declining. I'm not interested in this video really in the details of the calculation. I wanted 2 different methods to have a reason for these multiple activities. That's my real intent, is to show you these multiple activities. So this is the main activity, just these buttons leading to this, then start, and we create the new intent and then start the activity with that intent. Okay, so let's look at straight line depreciation. Okay, I had some, I wrote not just an on create, but also an on resume. And I have a shared thing for if I edit any of the text view, edit texts to clear out the thing. So that is outside. So my clearing code, here's my clearing code. That's outside of the on create. And I also have an on resume, that's outside of on create. So I've declared some things at the class level so that they would be available to all the methods. So I have shared preferences in on create and also in on resume. So I've declared that up here, but I'm just sort of declaring that I'm going to have it. I'm not initializing it. So I'm starting it at null. And because then it will change, make sure you use var and not val. I have my calculation involves an initial, a salvage, and a lifetime. So I'm just starting them with 001. The F here indicates that it's a float. So I am using the value to sort of establish the type. So it will, if I don't have the F, it's going to confuse it later when I'm putting in a float. I'm going to, again, I have it on create and on resume, and I want access to all of my edit texts. So I'm declaring them here and using the late init word. So then I don't have to initialize them here, but I will declare them here. They'll be available in more than one place this way. Okay, here's my on create. Here is that top. So I'm on double declining rather than straight line depreciation. Let me get to the straight line depreciation. Here, this is the action bar. And so I said I'm going to have an action bar. Here's its title, straight line depreciation. And then this allows me to go back to home. So there are two combinations, this set display home as up enabled, and then also that in the AndroidManifest for straight lines saying that its parent activity was the main activity. The combination of those two things are what allowed that sort of back action. So I can go back to the main activity. Okay. I declare a button for making the schedule, a text view for creating the schedule. I am now initializing the edit text, the initial, the salvage, the life. I am establishing click listeners, or actually not click listeners, text change listeners for them all. So they all share the same schedule clear. So that's what that stands for. And that is that method down here. It's a text watcher method. There are three. There's the sort of before, during, and after, and I'm only doing anything in the during, and while somebody's changing the text, I clear out the schedule. So if they're changing any of the data, I'm clearing out the schedule that I previously might have generated. So that's what I did here. So initialize the edit texts, give them an event listener. Here I'm establishing my shared preference and shared preference editor. And now I'm getting any values that I might have stored. And for 40,000, 2007, those were my default values. Now I had run the program before I showed it to you, so you didn't get to see these default values. I already had something shared in the shared preferences. But if you sort of cleared out, I'm not going to do it because it takes a little too much time, but if I went to the AVD manager and wipe the data, then I would be starting the program from scratch after that, and I wouldn't have any thing in the shared preferences. And then I would see the first time I ran it. After that, I would see the default values. But here I have a shared value called initial, salvage, those are the keys. And then here are my default values, but I also have remembered values, and that little F here indicating that these numbers are floats. And then here I am setting the text of my edit text to those values. Here's my button click event for the click listener. I'm getting, now this is in on create. So when it starts up and I'm getting what I remembered for the initial salvage in life, but then the user may come along and type something else. So when I click on the button schedule, I get a new initial salvage in life from the edit texts. So I go to the edit text, I get the text, I convert it first to a string and then to the appropriate type I want, to float or to int. Here's my calculation. This is the easy calculation for straight line depreciation. I set my value equal to the initial value to start off with. I calculate, it's the same depreciation each time. So I'm doing it this outside of the loop. The initial minus the salvage divided by the life. That's how much I'm going to reduce it by each time. I clear out anything I previously had in my schedule. And then I'm looping through, subtracting off my depreciation from my value each time and using a pen to sort of display what year it is and what the value is that year. So I'm calling that my depreciation schedule. I'm also remembering for any future use of the program, the initial salvage and lifetime value. So this time I'm putting, I have the appropriate types, float, int, And I have to say with shared preferences, apply, or it doesn't happen. That's like a commit in a database. And this is my on resume. On resume, I'm just going to the shared preferences and grabbing anything that I need to remember and loading up the edit texts. Down here finally was, I think I already showed you the clearing event that was shared by all the different edit texts. So when the text is changed, all 3 edit texts use this event, and I'm not, I don't need anything specific about which edit text got me here. If you change any of the data, I'm clearing out the schedule. And the double declining is all the same as straight line, except a different calculation. But I'm not interested so much in the calculation as in the multiple activities and maybe a little bit of the shared preference used to communicate. So maybe I will show that in double declining, I have the same shared preference. So I've got to use that same name when I finally declare it down here. Shared preference depreciation, that was the same as what I did for the straight line activity. So they're using the same name for the shared preferences, so it's shared between them. And mostly it is the same with a slight variation on the calculation because it's a different depreciation schedule being shown, but otherwise it's, in terms of activities and so on, it's all the same. Okay, I think that's what I wanted to show you in this one. Multiple activities and shared preferences for communicating between them. Thank you for your attention.